That day, I realized one thing. My parents loved me, but they didn't understand that I was already an adult. My name is Elizabeth Watson. I'm 35 years old. And that morning, my boss called me into his office. I thought it was just a regular work meeting. Lately, we had been working on many projects. Sometimes he would call me in to discuss deadlines or new tasks. But when I walked into the office, he looked a little strange. He didn't start speaking right away. He just looked at me for a few seconds. Then he said, "Elizabeth, I need to ask you a question." I nodded. Of course. He paused. And then he said something I never expected to hear. "Your parents called us this morning." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. "Excuse me?" He frowned slightly. "Your parents. They said they're worried about you." I felt something inside me grow heavy. He continued. "They said you're taking on too much work. And that it would be better for you to reduce your workload right now." I stayed silent. He clearly didn't understand what was happening. "Elizabeth, I just wanted to make sure. Is everything all right with you?" I took a deep breath. And slowly said, "Yes. I'm fine." He nodded. But he still looked slightly confused. "It's just, parents usually don't call their adult children's workplace." I gave a faint smile. "Yes. They usually don't." But at that moment, I already knew what had happened. Because it wasn't the first time. My parents always said they did these things out of love. That they just wanted to protect me. That they were simply worried. And sometimes I almost believed them. But when I walked out of my boss's office and closed the door behind me, I suddenly realized one thing very clearly. This couldn't continue anymore. Because my parents had been protecting me my whole life. And that was exactly why I had never truly lived. My parents always said the same sentence. "We're just worried about you." And when I was a child, it sounded normal. Even right. My mother, Gladys Watson, always wanted to know everything. Where I was. Who I was with. What time I would be back. My father, Jack Watson, was calmer. But he almost always supported my mother. If she said something was a bad idea, he agreed. If she said someone wasn't right for me, he agreed with that too. When I was little, I didn't see anything strange about it. I thought I simply had very caring parents. But over time, that care began to turn into something else. I remember one evening especially well. I was about 12 years old. For the first time in my life, I had been invited to a sleepover at a friend's house. She was my classmate, Megan. For me, it was a huge event. I had asked my parents for a long time to let me go. And when my mom finally said yes, I was incredibly happy. I packed a small bag. My pajamas. My toothbrush. My favorite book. I felt almost like an adult. That evening Megan and I watched a movie and ate popcorn. We laughed. Talked about school. And I remember thinking at that moment, this is probably what a normal childhood looks like. But around 10 in the evening, Megan suddenly left the room. A minute later she came back. She looked a little confused. "Elizabeth, your mom called." At first I didn't understand. "What?" "She said you need to go home." I frowned. "But why?" Megan shrugged. "She said you're not feeling well." I felt a strange feeling in my chest. Because I felt perfectly fine. But 20 minutes later someone rang the doorbell. It was my father. Jack Watson. He stood in the doorway and calmly said, "Elizabeth, get your things." I looked at him. "Why?" He answered simply, "Let's go home." I didn't say anything. I just picked up my bag. The car ride home was quiet. Finally I asked, "Mom, why?" My mother turned toward me and said in a calm voice, "We're just worried. It's better for you to be at home." I didn't answer. I just looked out the car window. But at that moment I had my first strange thought. It felt like my parents were more afraid of the world than I was. After that sleepover, the same pattern kept repeating. Every time something new appeared in my life, my parents began to worry. And almost always it ended the same way. Interference. When I was 14, I had a new group of friends. We did homework together. Walked around after school. Sometimes we just sat in the park and talked. For me, it was a normal teenage life. But one evening my mother called me into the kitchen. She was sitting at the table. My father stood by the window. And from the expressions on their faces I immediately understood this was going to be a serious conversation. My mother said calmly, "Elizabeth, we want to talk about your friends." I sat down across from her. "What about them?" She exchanged a glance with my father. Then she said the familiar phrase, "We know better. These friends aren't right for you." I felt confused. "Why?" My father shrugged. "We just notice these things. People can have bad habits. Wrong values." My mother added, "We don't want you to end up in bad company." I tried to explain. "But they're normal. We just hang out after school." But the conversation was already over. The next day I learned that my mother had called the parents of one of my friends. She told them I wouldn't be coming over anymore. After that, my meetings with friends slowly began to disappear. Every time the reason was the same. "We're just worried." At first it seemed temporary. But then I started noticing something strange. The older I became, the fewer decisions in my life actually belonged to me. And when the time came to choose a university, I thought for the first time that maybe my life had already been moving in a direction I never chose. When I finished school, I faced a real choice for the first time. I applied to several universities. One of them was in another city. It was a good university. It had the program I had always dreamed about. And when the acceptance letter arrived, I remember sitting on my bed and staring at my phone screen. I was smiling. It felt like my life was finally beginning. But that evening we were sitting at dinner. I told my parents. My mother immediately went quiet. My father placed his fork on the table. And the room became slightly quieter. After a few seconds my mother said, "That's too far." I tried to explain. "But it's a good university. And the program there is better." My father calmly replied, "There are good universities here too." I felt that familiar feeling rising inside me. As if the conversation was no longer about a choice, but about a decision that had already been made. My mother looked at me gently and said, "We just want you to stay closer to us." She spoke calmly, as if it were obvious. It's another city, another life. We would constantly worry. I tried to argue. I tried to explain that it was important to me. But every conversation ended the same way. "We just want what's best for you." In the end, I chose a university close to home. At the time it felt like a compromise. Something temporary. I thought that later I would start living the way I wanted. But years passed. And slowly I began noticing something strange. Every time a new choice appeared in my life, my parents somehow appeared beside me, ready to tell me again that they knew better. And one day it stopped being only about my education. It became about the person I loved. I was already over 30 when I met Daniel Reed. It happened by accident. We worked in the same company, but in different departments. One day we ended up on the same project. At first it was just normal conversations. Work. Coffee during breaks. But over time we began spending more time together. Daniel was a calm person. He didn't try to impress anyone. He didn't speak in big dramatic words. But around him I felt something simple. Peace. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like my life was finally moving in the right direction. After a few months, I decided to introduce him to my parents. I thought it would be a normal dinner. A little awkward. But normal. We sat at the table. Daniel talked about his job. My father asked questions. My mother was silent most of the time. But I noticed she was watching him too closely. When Daniel left, my mother immediately said, "I don't like him." I was confused. "Why?" She shrugged. "I just don't." My father added calmly, "He's not right for you." I looked at them. "How do you know?" My mother answered as if it were obvious. "We just notice these things." I felt that familiar tension again. "But this is my life." My father sighed. "Elizabeth, we've already introduced you to a good young man." I looked at him in surprise. "What?" My mother said. "He comes from a respectable family. He has a stable job. He's a much better match for you." I felt something tighten inside my chest. Because suddenly I understood something very simple. My parents were trying to do the same thing they had done my entire life. Choose my life for me. But at that moment I didn't yet know that the most serious interference would happen a little later. And that it would lead me into my boss's office. That morning, when my boss told me that my parents had called my workplace, I didn't know what to feel at first. Embarrassment, anger, or simply exhaustion. Because part of me was no longer surprised. That evening I went to my parents' house. The house looked exactly the same as always. The same light in the kitchen. The same flowers on the windowsill. When I walked in, my mother immediately said, "Elizabeth, did you come for dinner?" I looked at her. "We need to talk." My father looked up from his newspaper. "What happened?" I stayed silent for a few seconds. Then I asked, "Did you call my boss?" My mother answered immediately, "Yes." As if there was nothing strange about it. I slowly exhaled. "Why?" She said calmly, "We're worried about you." My father added, "You work too much. That's not healthy." I felt that familiar feeling rising inside me. The same one I had felt for many years. But this time I wasn't going to stay silent. I looked at them and said quietly, "You didn't protect me. You were suffocating me with your overprotection." For a moment the room fell silent. My mother frowned. "Elizabeth, what kind of words are those?" My father shook his head. "We've always done everything for you." I nodded. "I know. And I'm grateful for that." But then I added, "But you never allowed me to make my own decisions." My mother said softly, "We just wanted to protect you from mistakes." I looked at her. "Mistakes are part of life." My father sighed. "You say that because you don't understand how dangerous the world can be." And at that moment I realized something important. My parents truly believed they were doing the right thing. They weren't trying to control me out of cruelty. They were simply afraid. But their fear had become my cage. I looked at them and said calmly, "I know you love me." My mother nodded. "Of course we do." And then I said the words I should have said long ago. "But please, let me go. Let me live my life on my own." They stayed silent. I stood up from the table. And for the first time I felt a strange sensation. As if I had finally taken a step I should have taken many years ago. After my last words, the kitchen fell silent. My mother looked at me as if she didn't understand what was happening. My father slowly removed his glasses and placed them on the table. "Elizabeth," he said, "we just wanted to protect you." I nodded. "I know." My mother quietly added, "The world can be cruel. We just wanted nothing bad to happen to you." I looked at them and for the first time I didn't feel anger or resentment. Only a strange clarity. Because now I understood something. They truly loved me. But their love had always looked the same. Control. Fear. And decisions made instead of me. I slowly picked up my bag from the chair. My mother noticed immediately. "Where are you going?" I answered calmly. "Home." She frowned. "But you are home." I shook my head. "No." I looked at them and said quietly, I rented an apartment. For a second they both froze. My father broke the silence first. When? A few days ago. My mother looked as if she couldn't understand it. Why didn't you tell us? I smiled slightly. Because you would have tried to talk me out of it. My father slowly stood up. Elizabeth. I raised my hand, stopping him. Please. Let me do this myself. The room became quiet again. I looked at them one more time. At the house where I had lived almost my entire life. At the kitchen where we had eaten dinner hundreds of times. And I said calmly, I know you love me. My mother nodded softly. And then I said the final words. But love should not be a cage. I opened the door. And for the first time in my life, I walked out of that house. Without their permission. And strangely, the world outside the door was not nearly as frightening as they had always believed.